I start?
That's
taking?
it.
Oh.
There's a separate button.
Good evening all. I'm Akshi, Toastmaster of the day. And it's good we have less people, so we'll be in time this time. So, beginning with the roles, we have TM as me, TTM as Aditya, Timer as Rahul, speech validator for impromptu speeches as Nilanjan, and speech validator for prepared speeches as Nilanjan himself, and timer is Anusha, Rahul, and grammarian is Anusha, and general evaluator is Manisha. Okay, so begin with the prepared speeches. We have just only one prepared speech, so we'll call Devapriya Datta. Well, okay. And before beginning, sorry, what is the word of the day? Amazing. Anybody would like to give suggestion on what is the word of the day?
Smirk.
Smirk.
Smirk is like a self-satisfied smile.
Okay. So word of the day is smirk. That means a self-satisfied smile or something like that. Devapriya.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I don't really have a topic for speaking today. It's more like a monologue on something that just popped up in my mind. I never fully understood the concept of the difference between optimists and pessimists in the first place. I mean, frankly, to say that I never really understood the difference between optimists, pessimists, opportunists, nihilists, anything that ends with an IST, for that matter. But if I were to confidently say that the commonly held belief or the fundamental difference between an optimist and a pessimist, in the sense that an optimist is someone who looks forward to his future, believes that his future is supposed to be more favorable than his present, and the exact opposite for the pessimist. This is not exactly the fundamental difference that exists between the two. I think there is another line, another layer of difference between them, in the sense that a pessimist essentially does not believe that he is the sole architect of his future. He doesn't have this concept, or he does have that concept that there are greater forces at play than what he himself can do and how he himself can shape his future. On the other hand, an optimist firmly believes that what he does today reflects tomorrow, or in other words, the popular saying that we have heard, that we reap what we sow today. That being said, there is a general stereotype about pessimists, optimists for that matter. For example, if you think about optimists, the first thing that pops up in our mind is somebody standing with a huge air-filled chest, looking at a huge journey in front of him. Everything that he hopes would happen is better than what he currently has. On the other hand, if you think about a pessimist, the general outlook is that he sits looking at a wall with his head at 45-degree angle to his body, and that's it. He's quite lost it. He doesn't really look forward to his future anymore. Actually, if we actually look at some of the religions that have further exaggerated this belief, for example, Buddhism for that matter, Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, all these religions that come from the Middle East, not the Middle East, the Far East, for example, the Orient, as we say. These religions sort of stress on the fact that you would do much better, considerably better, if you were to just glide along with the situation rather than actively trying to change it to your own benefit. On the other hand, if you look at certain mainstream religions like Hinduism, Christianity, they all have this concept of karma and phal, as we say in Hinduism. Similarly, in Christianity, it is that you get what you do. And whatever you put to the world gives back to you in the same proportion. Again, having said that, apart from the religious aspect of it, I think we as individuals, as human beings, are engineered to think in a way that our whole life is essentially a string of objectives. We tend to live through life as Spider-Man seems to glide himself first, sort of grasp a building with his whatever technique he does. He clings on to something, an immediate short-term objective, while having a longer-term objective in mind at the same time. And then he hops on from one objective to the other. And all the while he believes that his immediate objective is something that is going to propel him towards the next one and also alleviate him from his current position that he is in. And he smirks at the thought. And apart from that, so when we talk about the Spider-Man aspect, what we are saying is that we all like to be driven. We want our lives to be driven by objectives. The whole idea of a gliding, free life, if you consider your life to be a playground, an open playground with ultimate boundaries rather than one objective or a post after next, a milestone after another. If you consider your world to be an open space and you stop for a moment, and when I say stop, these immediate pauses are often involuntary and they are brought about by failing to achieve an objective. So when you fail to achieve an objective, you go down in life, you have a short-term setback, you tend to stop where you are, you tend to stop looking at your next objective for a moment, and you tend to look around you. That is when your peripheral vision comes into play. And it is through your peripheral vision, you tend to observe many of the things that are in your immediate vicinity, which you never really looked at. You are simply flying past them to your next objective. When you look at these things, that is when you believe that there is more to your present than what you consider to be, and there is really no reason to just rush forward to your future, given how rich your present is. So finally, just to wrap things up, I would like to use a quote from one of the video game series called Assassin's Creed that I play a lot. And you may or may not be familiar with this, most likely not. So here it goes. This is a bit contextual, so it doesn't exactly fit exactly into what I'm saying, but then again, you get the drift. When I was a young man, I was foolish enough to believe that our creed could put an end to all this conflict. If only I had the humility to believe that I have lived enough for one life, I have seen enough for one life, and perhaps I have done my part in it. Going forward, that is how he ended, and the final thing that he said at the end is that nothing is true, everything is permitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Devapriya. That was indeed a confident and an optimistic speech. The second prepared speaker is Shibani. Sorry, I forgot to introduce the R counter. I don't know even who's that. Shibani.
Good evening, everyone. My topic is Mahabharata and Indian politics. I was short of ideas and I thought what I will talk about in today's prepared speeches. Then I am very much interested in Mahabharata. I read the whole Mahabharata during my childhood itself. And also I think this is the election season. So I thought this idea came to my mind that I can cross-connect between these two. So yeah, today I want to talk about Mahabharata in Indian politics. Now we know that in Mahabharata there is one saying like in Sanskrit it is like yadi hasti tada niyantra yana hasti natat kachit. That means if you don't find anything in Mahabharata, then that thing does not exist. I believe in that. I think if you don't find anything in Mahabharata, that really does not exist, and if you don't find any strategy or game plan in Indian politics, that really does not exist in outside world also. So what is Mahabharata? Coming to this Mahabharata basically this shows the issues related to game plan, strategies, and also at the same time dharma and rightness. Now this simultaneous existence of both dharma and all this at the same time real life politics, it makes Mahabharata one of the most interesting book for current Indian political drama. Now I will not spend much time in this. In Mahabharata we can see various aspects of strategy, like what is strategy, whatever we are strategizing, that will give us the correct result, and whether the strategy is real or it is simply an illusion. That means it is simply illusion of human being that they can control the future world, whatever it is not yet happened. So now moving to the next point, I want to compare some characters of Mahabharata with the current Indian politics. First, my favorite Shakuni. Yeah, I think Shakuni, he is the great strategist, and whenever I see him, his smirk just comes to my mind. What I seen in that Mahabharata, that television series. So yeah, he is a great strategist. He was not very strong person, but still he was a most influential person in Mahabharata. And also he gave lots of good plans, but interestingly most of them gave very short-term advantages but long-term disadvantages, you can say. Like be it like poisoning Bhim, or be it that famous dice game or be it burning that Lakshadweep, that Griha. So what happened in the Bhim's poison case? During Bhim's poison case, after this poisoning, Bhim became much more stronger thanks to the Sudharas that was provided to him by the Nagas. Next, that is Lakshagriha, that burning. After that, this Lakshagriha burning only, Pandava, they got married with Draupadi and they got an ally with Drupad. Now next, there is famous dice game. We know that during this dice game, Pandavas lost everything. But still, during this time only, Arjun get all of his, most of his weapons, you can say. Most of his weapons. So, yeah, all of his plans that were short-term and that eventually backfired to him. Now, coming to this in current Indian politics, I don't want to degrade anyone, but I want to compare Sonia Gandhi with Shakuni. Yeah, we know PM is the face of EPA government, but we are all very aware that Sonia Gandhi is the backbone of this EPA government. Whatever is going on in EPA, he is the masterminder, but she does not come in front. So again, rejecting the PM post in 2004, that was one of her masterstroke. And again, now she is trying to promote Rahul Gandhi to the PM post, and by first promoting him to the Congress vice president, that is another masterstroke. So whenever I think about Shakuni, she is the first to come to my mind. Next, there is Dhritarashtra. And Dhritarashtra was one of the least discussed character in Mahabharata, and you will not get any prize to guess who is the Dhritarashtra in current EPA government. Yeah, obviously, he is our own beloved Prime Minister. He is an excellent scholar, great as a finance minister during the economic recession, but he is not a very good leader. You can say, as a Prime Minister, he is not succeeded. The next, moving to Bhishma Pitamaha. Now, Bhishma Pitamaha, I am not very sure whether I can compare Pranab Mukherjee as Bhishma Pitamaha. But still I want to, because no one came to my mind. So we know that during the 2004 to 2012, though Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, but he was Pranab Mukherjee is basically the second person in UPA government. He was behind all the strategies, and also he used to strategize all those things. Now moving quickly to the very important person of this Mahabharata war, that is Mahabharata's Yuvraj, Duryodhan. And yeah, Rahul Gandhi will be best fitted in that role. Now we know that Duryodhan was a very strong warrior, but he never approved the, greatness or strength or power of Pandavas. He thought that this Hastinapur throne is his birthright. And he got an ally in Karna. He just exploited his goodness or inadequacy or whatever I say. Karna is a great person, but I think sometimes he suffered from inadequacy or inferiority complex, and Duryodhan exploited that part very well. So in current scenario also, Rahul Gandhi is best fitted for that role. He thought, not only him, whole PPA government thinks that this Indian PM post is his birthright, and as a Karna, he got all of Indian people who are emotionally full. He think that this PM post is only for Gandhis. So obviously he will be promoted to the next as PM post. So he is the most blue-eyed boy of Indian politics. So yeah, coming to this end, and last I say, currently in this session there is a Mahabharata staged, and I can see lots of corrupts, but I did not find any Pandava, and I'm really voting for Lord Krishna. I think whenever he will come, everything will be in equilibrium. So that's it.
Thank you, Shivani. That was really a different perspective and insight towards Indian politics by Mahabharata vision. And yeah, maybe it may help you in the upcoming elections. So moving towards prepare impromptu speeches. I'll invite towards table topic master.
So again, this is not what I was expecting when I thought about coming up with these topics, because I thought there'll be a packed crowd as we were having till some time back. But this is more or less a continuation of what we saw in the last session. I don't know if anyone of you were there, except for you there. So you were not there, Shivam? You were there? Okay. So apart from that, we had a sex-themed session, okay? And the purpose of that session was just to make sure that people are much more comfortable with the topic, because this is something that is very prevalent in India or everywhere else in the world. You can't really avoid it, and you shouldn't. It's good to some extent, though Anjali would say otherwise. You were voting for it, right? Yeah. Fine. So who was the other person? Arjun. He was against it. He was drastically against it. So anyway, so that was the session that we had. We thought that we were going to take that a bit further and kind of change it a bit. Now that I want to do this very differently, but because we do not have the PPT that I made, so it's going to be very normal. I'm not sure if we should go ahead with this or save it for later, because you won't get such topics too often. So it's your call. What do you want to do?
You have the PPT in a pen drive? Or?
I have the PPT on my phone, but then I won't be able to play the sounds at all.
You should save it for a later date.
And what do you do today? They will come up with some topics. Has every one of you given your icebreaker? So first we'll have Anusha give her icebreaker, okay? Because anyways, we were short of prepared speeches. Until then, we will think of something to do during the impromptus.
So shake hands with David for the change.
You can go and shake her hand also.
Well, one more thing, if you can do, like, each one of you write a topic of your choice and we'll collect and let them be the impromptu topics for the day.
Okay, good evening, Toastmasters. Since due to the lack of attendance, I've been in this uncomfortable position of giving my icebreaker like an impromptu speech. I'll try my best to introduce myself to you guys. Although most of you, I think you know me. I come from Mysore. It's a place in Karnataka which was the royal city way back in time, because the Vodayas were based in Mysore. And I was born and brought up in Mysore, and I did all of my schooling and my graduation studies in Mysore itself. A little bit about how I grew up. Growing up, I was in a convent, and so I had a lot of fondness about Christmas carols and stuff like that. So I grew up in the midst of all Christian schools, so it was a little different. Then later on, I moved from a class of 80, which was the smallest class I've been part of, and I moved into a class of 100 where people were sitting 6 students in a bench, and the bags were placed between our legs, and the rooftops leaked, but it was still deemed to be the best school in Mysore. So we all lived through that, and while we were there, I made some incredible friends, and what we shared was probably, I have also mentioned my friend Namrata before in one of my impromptu speeches, when Devapriya gave me the question about who would I leave all my money behind to. So I'd give it to her. The reason being that we were both crazy about dogs. We would run around the school naming all the puppies in the school. We would, I don't know, although we hated aerated drinks, we always named them Miranda or Pepsi, like that. So yeah, we also grew up, we were a little different from the rest of the girls in the class because we were crazy about cricket. So we had this one friend who lived 100 meters away from the school, and she would go home for lunch. So we would pray to her every time she goes when there's a cricket match, and we would ask her to come back with the cricket scores. We even went out to write down, check the score on her hand so that she comes back with the scores. So yeah, growing up we were a little bit crazy, and growing up, I think unfortunately both of us have graduated to liking short hair more than anything else. So much to the annoyance of our mother-in-laws, we both have short hair, and one more thing is I also am a very outdoor kind of person, which means that I enjoy outdoor activities more than anything else. So growing up, yeah, I had a craze for cycling. So even when I grew up and had a good job and everything, instead of buying a vehicle, I ended up buying a bicycle. Unfortunately, last week it got stolen, and I'm like really depressed about it. Other than that, I also enjoyed a lot of trekking. So, and started off with like small trekking trips in Karnataka. Karnataka is a very beautiful place in terms of like there are a lot of we have the Western Ghats in Karnataka, so it gave us a lot of places to explore. Later on, 2 or 3 years ago, I had the opportunity of trekking in the Himalayas, and I went along with my friends. And one of my friend Vikas, I went. He was also part of our friends gang that we had. We had such an incredible time. Yeah, we spent like almost 6 days together, walking a total of about 65 kilometers. And what happened 2 months later is that we were in love, and a year later I ended up marrying that guy. So that's how I fell in love. I fell in love on a Himalayan trek, and yeah, that is one thing I would certainly recommend to all of you, because when you haven't had bath for 1 week and you're like going through the toughest tracks in you know, when it comes to mountaineering and all of that, extreme temperatures, there's very little pretending that people can do. So you really come to know what a person is in real life. And along with him, yeah, we both share the craze for cycling. So we both used to go on long cycling trips. And yeah, after I got married to him, I got hooked on to, I also started riding bikes. So yeah, although my dad is very proud of this fact, I also enjoyed riding my husband's Royal Enfield on Bangalore to Mysore. So hopefully none of you guys will report that, because I don't have a license to ride a motorbike, so don't go around complaining. And hopefully when I go home for vacations, I'll get a license, and also I'll buy a bicycle. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, Anusha, for a different ending note. Swagata.
You can give a speech. Sorry?
Yeah, I was-
I can give a speech.
Okay, perfect.
Rahul is ready to give that speech.
No, it matters. It matters. Exactly.
2 I gave last time. So
3 is convincing. It's convincing.
Very fast,